Hi, and welcome to this special episode about organization design. Now, organization design isn't about boxes and lines. It's about the relationships, decision rights, and expectations that shape how people actually work together. Today, we're absolutely delighted to have Jules Siegel-Hawley join us. And Jules was our guest on the CIPD Organization Development and Design Group event that we ran last week. In that event, Jules delivered one of the most accessible, grounded, and energizing introductions to organization design that we've seen. She busted myths, surfaced hidden dynamics, and reminded us why the real work of design sits beneath the surface. Now, during that session, we had so many questions from the audience that we've actually asked Jules to come back and record the session again and answer the questions we didn't have time to get to because we had so many. So a huge thank you to Jules for joining us. And Jules is founder and principal consultant at Andes. Jules also has a senior strategic advisory role at Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders. Jules leads organizational transformations for high growth companies and evolving enterprises, focusing on designing scalable people systems. Her work includes organization design, people strategy, and post-acquisition integration as well. Jules has previously worked at Integria, a global healthcare and services company, as VP of Organization Transformation and Development. And really interestingly, Jules started a career in clinical social work in the US, where she gained a Master of Social Work from Columbia University, which gives her a unique perspective on organization design and her approach to her work. Now, Jules is a cosmopolitan person. She splits her time between New York and Europe and is based in Brussels. And we just want to say a huge thank you to Jules for coming back and joining us again. And for those of you that didn't actually join the session itself, we're going to start from the beginning, and Jules will give us a quick introduction to organization design and some of the challenges we need to be aware of as well. So thanks, Jules.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. So hi, I'm Jules, and I run a small firm called Andes. I'm really excited to be here, and not just to talk about organization design with you all, but hopefully to make it feel real. This isn't just about theory or perfect org charts. It's about what it actually feels like inside of the team when things are flowing and when things very much are not flowing. At its core, I believe that organization design is just relationship design. It is the hidden structure behind how we make decisions, how we collaborate, and how we trust. And when we get that right, people can do their best work and hopefully actually feel good doing it. Just a quick introduction to Andes. We are a small hands-on consulting firm that helps fast-moving and evolving organizations move through change with clarity and with intention. That means that we help teams to build their structure, not just for the sake of it, but to actually support how people work, how they grow, how they make decisions as things shift. I like to say that we work at the intersection of people, process, and purpose, partnering with founders, with operators, leaders across tech, healthcare, private equity, and the nonprofit world. So whether you're scaling fast or you're trying to realign after a period of disruptive change, Andes meets you where you're at and helps you build something that can hold. So here is how we think about organization design. Like Garen said, it's not about moving boxes around. It's about creating the scaffolding that helps people work well together. At Andes, we simply define it as the intentional shaping of roles, structure, and relationships to bring your strategy to life. And to be very clear, it's never one and done. Good design should keep evolving, just like your team is continuously evolving. So what does org design look like in practice? It shows up in the choices that you make. It shows up in how work happens and how people are working together. So things like defining roles and levels with job architecture. So think, what's the scope of this role? How is it different from the level above or below? Clarifying who decides what through decision rights mapping, untangling confusion through org clarity workshops, rethinking how work flows with workflow mapping. It's not just the structure on the paper, but it's how people are actually using it every day. So if your design looks good, but no one knows how to move through it, it's not working. So To be clear, you don't always need a full reorg, but you do need design when things start to stretch or feel strained. So maybe you're scaling fast and roles haven't caught up yet. Maybe there's been a leadership turnover and decisions feel stuck in a limbo. Or maybe you've merged with another team and now everyone's playing by a different set of rules. Org design becomes critical when you are entering into new territory, like a new market or a new product line, or you're trying to rebuild culture after a rough patch, a period of burnout, or a period of high attrition. All three. It's in moments like these that you need more than just good intentions. You need structure that can hold what's changing and make people feel like they know where they stand in relation to the big picture vision and the strategy of the company. Why does this matter now? Why org design? Why today? I think it's pretty obvious to the people that are listening in on this call, most likely, but the ground is constantly shifting. Strategy isn't something that you can set once a year anymore and forget about it. It's something that needs to be revisited on a monthly basis, even. People want more from work now, meaning clarity, flexibility, a sense of purpose. And now AI is reshaping how work is getting done at every level. In this kind of dynamic environment, you can't afford to just set and forget how your org is designed. Org design is what makes your strategy real, and it's how you turn your values into behavior and strategic ambition into real, everyday. Here's how we approach org design at Andy's. We believe in minimum viable structure, MVS. So it's just enough shape to support clarity, but never so much that it slows you down. We don't see friction as something to eliminate. It's where relationships live, right? It's often the signal that something real needs attention. We treat job architecture as strategic infrastructure, not just back office HR hygiene stuff. It's what gives people consistency, fairness, and a way to grow, and a fantastic foundation to push off from to do the rest of the design work. And we still believe in hierarchy, not as a means of control, but as clarity. When it's done well, hierarchy actually helps people to move fast. And when it's misused, it can get in the way. At the end of the day, we design with three things in mind: clarity, flexibility, and scale. Always. At the end of the day, we design with three things in mind: clarity, flexibility, and scale. Always. So if you are in a moment of growth or change and want a sparring partner, I would love to talk. This is literally my favorite conversation. It's the work that I care about most, helping teams make sense of where they're going and how to grow or evolve without losing themselves along the way. Thanks so much for having me today. I can't wait to take your questions.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jules. So one question that we really want to ask is, why do you say organization design is really relationship design?
Good question. Organizational structure is just scaffolding. What holds that scaffolding up is things like trust, power dynamics, unspoken agreements. So when something feels broken, people tend to rearrange the boxes just to demonstrate that a change has taken place. But I find that rarely solves what's really going on. As a matter of fact, it never solves what's really going on. Relationships are the real infrastructure, and design fails when you ignore them. So org design work is less about taking the org chart at face value, more about how people relate to it and to each other. You have to dig in deeper, even to uncomfortable places, to really get to the real heart of the work.
Brilliant. One question I wanted to ask is, does hierarchy still matter in organizations? We're hearing more and more about flat organizations, aren't we? But does hierarchy still have a place in organization and organization design as well?
I definitely think so. A million times, yes, but only when it's used as a tool and not as a shield or as a cover. So good hierarchy helps people move faster and feel safer. The trick is not to flatten everything. It's to make sure that people know who to go to and what to expect. you have to be super meticulous about how the core processes flow and how decisions are being made. Who has the ultimate power? Without someone with that final stamp of approval identified, you're going to spin and spin and spin your wheels. I've seen it. It's painful.
And again, another thing that we see is that companies default to reorganizations when something's off. Why is that the thing that so many organizations reach for? Because it's a lot of work, isn't it, for an organization to embark on?
Totally. It feels like you're doing something. But like I've said, most problems aren't just structural, they're relational or they're behavioral. So I call it the reorg reflex. It's often a distraction from the real conversation, which is, where is the trust breaking down?
Now we're going to just shift into the audience's questions that we didn't quite get to because we had so many. The first couple of questions we got about leadership engagement. We've already started to talk about it, so it's a really important area. So one of the questions I want to ask is, how do you get senior leaders to actually look beneath the surface at the flow, the blockers, the dynamics, instead of just arranging these boxes?
You have to start by changing the question. So it's not what's the right structure. It's more what's getting in the way of flow. From there, you can help your leaders look beyond the chart and into what's actually happening beneath the surface. So where are decisions getting stuck or bouncing around? Where are people stepping in or quietly stepping back, right? Who technically has the authority, and then who is really the one that's influencing the outcomes. So you have to ask targeted, grounded questions, and then we play back what we see objectively and without drama. And this work can have a lot of drama, and that too can be a huge distraction that people get kind of bogged down in. So you have to strip out the noise for this to work, all of the gossip, all of the emotion, all of the politics. When we talk about org design, we're talking about probably the biggest hot button of humanity. So you're looking at titles, levels, compensation sometimes. These are highly loaded topics, and you have to do what you can to quiet the noise and create an infrastructure or a framework to support these conversations. When you do that, people can finally start to see the systems clearly, and that's when things start to shift. A lot of times what's being called a team issue is just a trust issue, maybe a blurry role, or a decision that nobody really owns. So design work begins when leaders stop reacting to the symptoms and they start to be honest about how work is actually moving through the organizational system. So minimize the subjectivity, enhance the objectivity as much as you can.
And how do you do that? Because, like you said, there is a lot of drama and people are always trying to recruit you to their story, aren't they? Like their perspective.
Sure. I like that, recruit you to their story.
And there is, and because the stakes are created, how do you sort of stay on solid ground when this is all happening?
Redesigns can definitely feel threatening, like I was just saying. So especially with leaders, senior leaders at that, whose identity or their influence is tied to the current setup. So I would say that the first step is to give clarity about why we're doing this exercise in the first place. So start with the why. We're not changing things just for the sake of changing them. Obviously, we are building a system that aligns structure with strategy, and that gives everyone a fair and transparent way to understand roles, levels, and what's expected of them. So we walk leaders through the common and hopefully simple logic about how levels are defined, what makes one role different from another, where decisions rights are supposed to sit, and why. And once people start to understand this reasoning and that it's being applied consistently for everybody, they're much less likely to assume that it's a political or a personal dig. We also show them where ambiguity today is causing friction, ideally in an area that will resonate for the person or the group that you're talking to, right? Classic change management. So you can cite things like duplicate ownership, unclear authority, decisions getting escalated unnecessarily, and then the result of this dysfunction. And then you can also reframe. So this isn't about taking power away, it's about making power clearer and more trusted. The threat isn't the structure. The threat is this sense of uncertainty. So a good process replaces guessing with clarity and should ultimately help your leaders move from defending their territory to leading with intention.
Brilliant. And looking at implementation challenges now, we had one specific question which was quite technical, which is how do you drive impact in a redesign where there's a no redundancy policy? Again, that's quite a unique situation, but some potential public sector bodies might have that as a challenge.
Yeah. Well, I think I said this on the call. Or on the previous call, I've never done a design exercise where the goal of the exercise is to reduce workforce. I can see how you get there, how you would say, well, now we have a common language. Now we know what everybody's doing. Now we can make informed decisions. I can see how you would get there and how this does provide the language to do a RIF exercise. I would highly recommend that you complete a job architecture exercise before you get to that point. You need to shift the ultimate goal from subtraction to coherence. So don't say, where can we cut? That's very threatening. Instead, ask, where is energy leaking? The work becomes about alignment, overlap, and untapped potential. Who's underused? Who's duplicating effort? Where is the work with no home? When you take out this fear of job loss, people stop protecting their turf and start to look at what's possible. They get more creative. So structure doesn't just reduce waste, it should redistribute capacity with intention. Intentionality is key.
That's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Yeah, because in a way, even if you don't have a no redundancy policy, it's a very positive exercise anyway, isn't it? Because organisations do suffer from entropy, like disorder just starts to come just from being, isn't it? So things like that can actually enable people to clean house and sort things out as well. Again, one of the things you look at is acquisition and merger. What's your advice for onboarding an acquired company's HR team into the organization design process quickly and respectfully? Because again, that's quite a sensitive issue, isn't it?
Totally. Integration is intrinsically emotional before it's operational. So I would say start from a place of respect and curiosity always. Before you teach about the frameworks, I would invite stories. What's made their organization work or hum? What are they afraid of losing? And then instead of doing some kind of onboarding or like training that's very cookie cutter, collaborate with them on a mapping exercise to the platform company's operating model. If one already exists, it should exist if someone's acquiring someone else. Or you could co-build a shared language where necessary. So if the language doesn't fit, if there really isn't a good match, then by all means work together to define what that language looks like. You need to make OD something that you do with them and not something that's happening to them. Trust forms faster through collaboration always, and trust is definitely what's needed for a successful company integration.
And then we had a question around job architecture, and I think that's something that you sort of introduced and sometimes is perceived as like an administrative exercise, but you're trying to sort of really sort of say, no, there's so much importance around it as well. So before I ask you a question on job architecture, what is job architecture and why does it matter in the organization design process?
Yeah, job architecture is the foundation. It's looking at it's the common language and the common logic that really digs into what a role is at the company and how the roles should be fitting together. It touches things like compensation. That's a pretty classic duo, compensation and job architecture, because you're able, once you have the job architecture, once you have those core accountabilities identified, you're able to then benchmark in the market for that role. When I did this work with Doctors Without Borders, I used to say, because I had to explain this a lot. Basically, we were working globally, right? And in the different contexts in which we were working, we didn't have a clear role identified for what it meant to be a nurse. And then we didn't have a clear level for what that nurse fall on. And so when we implemented a standard job architecture, we all of a sudden knew that a nurse was level X, level 5, and what their core accountabilities were. So at that point, we were able to say a nurse is a nurse is a nurse, whether you're in Malawi, whether you're in Iraq, whether you're in South Sudan, et cetera. And we knew what that meant intrinsically from a core accountability perspective. That didn't mean that we couldn't dig deeper and create a job description from there and say, okay, so these are the core accountabilities. This is the common language of what it means to be a nurse at this organization. And then depending on the context, you could add more accountabilities to then make it a more nuanced, like context specific description of what this person is doing. But regardless, we knew those core accountabilities, and that was crucial. And from there, it opens up the door for better reporting, better, more like collaborative recruitment across different offices. Job architecture is like the basis, and it's often seen as too technical, and it's not. It's actually, if you have a good, clear, simple job architecture, it buttresses everything else, and it lets you push off and have those bigger picture conversations that people always want to rush to get to.
You've sort of demonstrated the real importance of it. Why is it hard to get right? Because it does touch on some sacred cows in an organization, doesn't it?
Totally touches on the sacred cows. You're really starting to talk about the thing that we don't talk about, or like you're sort of pulling the curtain back. I will say HR needs to be in the room for this to be a good conversation. And a lot of times people want to design an operating model that don't have the technical background to do it. And so you'll see kind of chiefs of staff or strategy type people entering the picture and wanting to do stuff because it's like the sexy conversation. But in order to support those conversations well, there needs to be a really well-established job architecture. It's particularly sticky because the risk is high in that, like I said, it's a very emotional discussion. You're looking at social risk, potential legal risk if you're changing contracts and changing compensation structures, things like this. And then there's a financial risk as well. It can be expensive depending on how deep you're going. Definitely something that carries risk with it, but the reward is tremendous when you're actually able to get it right.
And if you don't do it, it gets harder to do over time, doesn't it?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And I don't think that you have to go, it doesn't have to be, in the olden days, you had really elaborate job architectures because people had more stagnant organizations than they do today. And there wasn't as much career mobility and there wasn't as much agility. And so I don't think that you have to go as deep as we have in the past. You can create simple structures, a simple infrastructure that we plug people into that will continue to evolve. But it is important that you do get down to the micro level of what does this role do? You're not just looking at big picture, you're digging into what each role does and then looking at how they interact. What are the points of connection between them? And that makes it a far richer, substantive conversation.
And now that you've catapulted job architecture into sexy things to do in the workplace rather than just like a burden, what resources or reading could you signpost people to?
Couple of recommendations. My favorite, but it's because I'm a total nerd, but Rupert Morrison's Data-Driven Organization Design is if you really want to dig in and understand how all of the pieces fit together, he's your guy. He's really fantastic. And this book, I wish I had it with me. It's doggy-eared, it's underlined, highlighter. It was sort of my Bible as I was building a job architecture a few years back for a company. And then if you want to understand things like work dimensions, Radford, I always see as the gold standard. So if you just look into Radford's work dimensions, it will just kind of be like a aha moment and be like, oh, this is what we talk about when we're talking about job architecture. I personally am a fan of and this is going to be controversial, I don't necessarily focus on one company's like a Radford job architecture. I'll use it as the basis, but I like to actually tweak and enhance the language depending on what the need of the organization is, and ideally in collaboration with my key stakeholders so that they feel a sense of ownership of what that common language is. But if you want a good, fantastic starting point for defining the language, Radford is where I turn to.
These are really good recommendations. We've got Rupert on in a couple of weeks on our podcast.
I know you do. It's so
thanks for
cool.
your recommendation. So we're
He's
really
the
looking forward.
best. Yes, yeah.
Really important question is, how do you get an organization ready for organization design without organization design becoming an afterthought? This is critical, isn't it? Because this is a big, tier one challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. You need to do the OD inside of the design, not after the fact. And actually, you should use this as an opportunity. When I think of these exercises, it's really, you can model it, frame it up as it's a microcosm of how the organization should be acting at all times, or collaborating at all times, making decisions at all times. And so it's a way to practice it together. So that means defining roles together, not in isolation, which I've been saying for a while. You have to do this collaboratively. That's how you get the ownership. That's how you manage the change when it comes time to actually roll the thing out. Plus, make sure that it's resonant with the people that are actually doing the work. So clarity sticks much better when it's been co-created. You need to surface tensions early. So use these structure conversations, which we know are loaded, to name the thing that's been going unsaid before it shows up as resistance later on for the rollout. And then you need to make sure that your decisions in this process are highly visible and that there's a clear process for that decision making, which I think we talk about in a bit around the governance of this. So show who's deciding what and how. People will trust the process more when they can see the logic behind the thing. The way people move through the process is the design. Like I said, it's a microcosm of how the org should be operating. If you ignore the human side of the thing, the relationship aspect of the thing, you're essentially building a new system on top of old behavior. And that's not ideal, to put it mildly.
Can I just ask one personal question? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So I am working with a senior leader, and what's happened is basically she's kind of come into it, and it's a huge HR exercise to restructure. And what's happened is she can't tell the team anything. She's embargoed. So in the meantime, sort of motivation is going down amongst the team because they're just waiting for September to come. How do you sort of maintain a team's motivation and focus during that kind of liminal space when they can't disclose? Obviously, it goes against a lot of the principles that you share, but sometimes managers find themselves in a situation where they can't share much of the information.
Right. What can they share and focus on that? I would even if you can't share the results, I would say share what the process is and share where you are in the process. And then share everything that you can. I've been there, by the way. So I grew up at Doctors Without Borders, where it's a lot about we're an open book, transparency, accountability, speak your mind. This was not the case when I got into corporate US workforces, which was news to me. But anyway, I had to learn to I had to be a little bit more tight-lipped about where things were. But what I could talk about was how we were getting there, like what the process was for making these decisions, and then also start asking them what their questions are and saying, I'm going to come back to you with an answer as soon as I can. But even creating a space for them to voice concern, voice questions, fears is critical. And then providing them with the information that you can share. That's actually quite innocuous. It's not like a big controversy. Share what you can so that you demonstrate good faith, and I want to be transparent with you, and get them to buy into the process that's been stood up. And then I guess elicit questions from from them so that you're in a conversation, and make sure that you answer those questions, even if not off the cuff in the moment, that you come back to them. And actually that would be a great start to your FAQ that you're going to use for your rollout.
So just looking at facilitation and governance.
Yeah.
So one question we had, which is, how do you hold up a mirror to group decision making during these mapping sessions? Because these group decisions, there's dynamics, there's bias at play, there's all sorts of things going on, aren't
Oh,
there?
yeah. Yeah. I make these sessions as tightly choreographed as I can, so that there is a real framework to hold the big conversations. And then inside of this container, you can make the invisible uncomfortably visible. So that might mean capturing how decisions just happened on a whiteboard and then replaying it back for folks, or asking, is this how you said that you wanted to work together? You can name the gap or demonstrate the gap between the stated values and how things are actually playing out in real time, gently but directly. So again, we talk about this is a microcosm of how the organization should be acting at all times. This is like a teachable moment. And I'm not saying you should approach any of this with an air of condescension. It's super objective. And it's like, okay, so you said that you wanted to see this in principle, or in theory, but in practice, here's how we got to this decision. Is that what you were looking to do? So it's not shaming ever. That won't go well. But it is about reflecting back. The system can't shift if it can't see itself. And I'm reminded, just like having a flashback to my clinical social work training, where the therapist is really meant to model relationships with the person that they're conversing with, and their number one job really is to reflect back what they're hearing, and really even like have a confrontation with them in a way that's healthy and grounded. And so I'm just thinking about that in this scenario. You are a model, you are a mirror. And these conversations are really teaching folks, this is how we should be working together all of the time. So you're saying the thing that no one's saying, which I think is a Claire Hughes Johnson reference, but really using this as an opportunity to lead the leaders and call out if something isn't in alignment with our stated values.
Thank you.
Clear?
Yeah. No, it's so important, isn't it? And I think, what you're saying there, it's the reframing, the playing it back kind of objectifies, it gets out of people's head, doesn't it? So they can look at it in the sort of the third person and gives them a little bit of distance from it as well. So that's a really powerful tool, isn't it?
You have to, and I think I opened by talking about like tightly choreographing these kinds of meetings. Like, don't try to take on too much, like take a little piece of the conversation and have like a framework that you're going to walk through. Make sure that you're teeing up the right decisions. I will also just call out from experience, sometimes if you're at the highest level with the executives and you kind of reflect back like this isn't in alignment, they might say it's not, and this is what it is anyway. And that's information for you. Where maybe you're disappointed in that response, but okay, so we're not embodying our values. Got it. And anyway, that can happen. It's happened to me, and it was surprising, because again, I'm a Doctors Without Borders girl, where it's all about, we do the right thing, or we tried to, you know what I mean?
Question that we've got, last one about facilitation governance is do you have an approach to contracting or governance and accountability in a change? And you've got some slides to share as well, haven't you?
I know. Thank you for reminding me. So yeah, I have learned to bake, this goes back to the tightly choreographed theme. I've learned to bake governance and decision points right into the structure, because the process. When the process is clear, people can focus on the things that really matter. They can have the real conversation. And honestly, the process, not being included in a meeting, not giving a timely update, making a decision without the right person in the room, the process is often scapegoated to avoid the real conversations. So I've learned you have to be meticulous in how you choreograph these governance structures. It keeps momentum without chaos. It builds trust with leadership if they feel like you've kind of really mapped this out in a clear, compelling way, they relax. And you have to make it obvious who owns what. This is, I actually just added the Andes colors and I'm loving it. But this is literally the slide that I use in all of my job architecture or org design implementation exercises, and really for any big change management exercise. Usually instead of the kind of description within, I'll have the names of the people, but this is what I pull up at the beginning of every executive steering committee meeting, and we just make sure, are these still the right names in the boxes, etc. So we've got a few roles. Decision makers, which is our steering committee. They step in when needed. Most choices get made further down. What you escalate to them, a lot of times in those meetings, which often happen on a monthly basis, sometimes bi-weekly, depending on where you are in the implementation process or in the process, design, implementation, is you're showing them the progress and validating kind of where we're at. And they'll usually give the final sign off. The core team, which I'm usually on, actually I'm always on, we run point. We're not just coordinating. We are the ones that are really doing the work. We're surfacing the risks. We're teeing up the tough calls to escalate to the steering committee. And we're keeping leaders confident in where we're headed. Subject matter experts are super important. So they are our pressure testers. You want to identify subject matter experts, SMEs, across the organization in different areas and at different levels. We pull them in to make sure that we're not designing in a vacuum and that they, again, are offering their unique perspective from their viewpoint in the organization, and then hopefully serving as champions in the long run because they've been a part of the process, they can speak to the process. And then people managers, crucial. People managers help us to see how this will land in the real world. They help us to flag our blind spots. And always the people managers are usually going to be the ones that are owning the communication in the end. When it comes to a job architecture exercise specifically, you need those people managers in the conversation to do the mapping to the job architecture. They know their teams best, right? The other thing that I wanted to call out is my next slide, implementation checkpoints. This is so helpful. And this is an example of what it could look like. In this rollout, I remember we actually separated, and this wasn't ideal, but we separated job architecture and compensation communications. So one happened in September, starting with the roles and the titles and the job profile. And then we had a compensation conversation in October leading up to the performance reviews in December, and kind of just explained where you were within your range, et cetera, et cetera. But the point of this is to show you we really broke things out into core milestones. And this was the second slide that we would show to the steering committee. We would let them know where we were in the process. Have we completed the employee role mapping? Have we completed the social impact analysis that comes with that employee role mapping once complete? And then we baked in a go, no-go decision for the executive steering committee. So we presented, these are the outputs of the social impact analysis. Here are the risks that we flagged for this specific business unit when we want to implement. Do we have your green light, your go, to move forward with the role and title communication? Breaking it up like this, these busy bigwigs got it. They felt taken care of, and it was a safe way to make sure that we had a final checkpoint. They felt engaged. It seems super simple. The most difficult stuff to land on usually is incredibly simple, where people are like, wait a minute, duh. Believe me, this has been a lot of iterations. It's taken me a minute to get to this level of clarity in this process, but it's been incredibly helpful in making sure that we're doing this safely. And I say safely because, like I said, there is risk in this work. It's a highly emotional, kind of volatile conversation. And so you want to make sure that you've really looked around all the corners, examined things from all angles, and that you're bringing the right people along for the process.
And I really like the point you're making there, which is the simplicity, isn't it? Because it has to be presented like that, but it's the know-how and understanding the terrain and making sure that everyone goes forward in interlock almost, isn't it?
Yes. And I'll say, in these executive steering committee meetings, they should be highly ceremonial in nature. And if there's going to be anything difficult that's coming up, I would recommend doing individual meetings with folks within that steering committee so that they know what to expect and you already have a sense of what their stance is and what they're going to say. It's politics, baby. So when you enter into that room, when everybody comes into the room, no one's going to be caught off guard. You're just really there to take a vote. But all of the back channeling has happened, and you can invite subject matter experts, ones that make sense, to those conversations. Sometimes it's crucial to just be as specific as possible and to choreograph these moments as tightly as you can, because these conversations are difficult. So you really want to make people feel taken care of, and you want to take off pieces of this conversation and present them in containers that people feel kind of supported in to have those conversations. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. As an organization development person, we love the word container because you're skillfully and from a craft person's perspective, designing a container for the right kind of talk to happen in that moment, isn't it? Without it feeling overwhelmed. Thank you so much. And thank you for being so generous and sharing, your workflow and all of that know-how as well. Last question.
Yes.
This was my question that I asked in the session that suddenly came to me.
Yes.
One of the big things about it is that the best organization design is informed by the strategy. It all flows from there as well. But this is a deeply pragmatic session. And let's be honest, a lot of strategies aren't that good. In fact, they're counter good. So what do you do about organization design if your strategy is a load of rubbish?
Yeah, you doorknobbed me in the last meeting because you asked this right as we were all hanging up, and I was like, oh, that's a really good question, and I was glad to have a minute to think about it actually. So I've prepared a response because I think I was harping on the strategy, and this is Rupert Morrison. The strategy is the input and performance management is the output. But if you don't have a good strategy, then the structure is a beautifully engineered lie. Let's be clear. Like you do need a good strategy. Organization design cannot fix strategic incoherence. If the direction is fuzzy, there's no amount of reporting lines or clarity and roles that will save you. So I talk a lot about, getting the micro right. That's the job architecture, but the big picture is the strategy, and everything needs to be tying back up to the strategy. You'll get motion, you'll get wheels turning, but you're not going to see any real progress. People are going to be busy, but not really anchored in anything. Decision making is going to spin in circles, and it will just overall feel like a demotivating exercise. You need social and political capital to call this out. And I think I've kind of said this a few times, like we're never shaming. Your role is a fine balance. And if you're HR coming into this, you likely don't have the same sway as a strategist might. That's in my experience, and that's not always the case. That's a generalization. But in general, you really have to be careful in how you call things out because you don't want to alienate yourself from the conversation or get shut out of the conversation. People don't want to hear that the strategy doesn't seem good. So when I sense strategic misalignment, I try to slow the conversation down and ask a question. Are we building a strategy that you believe in? And that question is going to land differently depending on who's in the room, but it's always going to open a door. And I will say that in some cases, the strategy doesn't exist yet. So I've supported integrations where there wasn't a platform company to lead the charge, and it was just a series of post-merger pieces that hadn't really settled. We had a bunch of new companies coming together as one. There wasn't one company that was sort of defining the direction. So in those moments, we mapped the current state. And I called this out to leadership at the beginning. I was like, guys, we don't have a strategy. We're going to map to the current state. It wasn't perfect, but it did give us a shared baseline and that common language that I've been talking about to push off from. So sometimes designing designing the structure is what reveals the strategy gap. In this case, there wasn't. It was really a bottom-up design, and it wasn't strategic by any stretch, because we weren't able to really design for the future. It was more saying this is where we are today. Again, that's a good starting point to build a strategy from, though, if you don't have one. The real OD work, I would say, is helping the leaders to see what's missing and then building just enough scaffolding to keep moving it forward. Have you ever heard of the wish, worry, wonder framework?
No, but it sounds good.
Yeah. I learned about it when I was working with palliative care physicians at a big health system on the West Coast. I'm going to give them a shout out, Dr. Ira Byock and Dr. Matthew Gonzalez. They were trying to train up the health system on how to navigate difficult conversations with patients. And I was like, this is good shit. This is good stuff, and you can take it elsewhere. So it's a simple but powerful tool for navigating hard conversations, especially when stakes are high or there are big emotions in the room. It helps you name what's true without putting people on the defensive. So I was thinking this would be a good tactical thing to share with you guys. So I wish connects to the stakeholder's intention or hope. It helps to build alignment with the person. I worry raises a concern in a way that's honest but respectful. And then I wonder lets you offer a reframe or an idea without sounding prescriptive. So it's not about softening the message, it's about delivering it in a way that people can actually hear. And that's, I think, what we're talking about. So strategy's not in alignment, or the strategy's rubbish, as you say. How do you initiate that conversation? So you ask, like, is this a strategy that we believe in? Let's see how that lands. If you want to get a little bit deeper, you could say something like, I wish the strategy felt as clear and grounded to the broader team as it likely did when it was created. I worry it may be more of a set of aspirations than a cohesive direction we can actually design around. I wonder what might open up if we paused to align on a few shared truths. Even a little clarity could unlock a lot.
Really
Boom, I just dropped my mic.
I think that is the place that we need to end this conversation, but that is so good, because it is so sensitive and people are invested in the strategy. It feels personal if you've been part of it. People all have their own relationship with the strategy as well, don't they? Yep. Too. So I think that creates enough role modeling and makes it safe enough for people to, and then you can start to have, and then the real conversation begins, doesn't it?
It sure does. And you've presented it in a way that they feel safe, taken care of, and not on the defensive, which can happen very easily with this kind of conversation.
Well, Jules, I want to say a huge thank you. We could keep talking for 6-7 hours, and I think there would still be value coming out of it as well. So loads of things have stood out for me. I just love some of the statements you've sort of said, which is like integration is emotional even before it's operational. You talked about the importance of job architecture, and I think that's really important. I think, it's a vehicle to get the really big important stuff discussed and talked about. Clarity, it works much better when it's co-created. Mm-hmm. You talked about the importance of playback and reframing. It's so important just to help people see it from a different perspective as well. And I love the wish, worry and wonder as well. And all of this is about that whole element of momentum without the chaos that you're talking about as well. So Jules, people are going to get so much value from it. If you are watching this, we'd really encourage you to watch it again. And a lot of the frameworks that Jules is sharing with you aren't just necessarily exclusively for organization design. It's like it's major projects at the center of an organization as well. So Jules, it's been brilliant. If you've enjoyed it, please do hit the like button. If you want to follow Jules's work, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
So you can reach me at jules@andysadvisory.co, which I believe is on the slide deck that we're going to send out with people. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Jules Siegel-Hawley, and I'm actually on there kind of a lot. So happy to answer your email there too.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much, Jules. Thanks so much for joining us on a Friday afternoon from Brussels. It's been a real pleasure. And thank you very much for everyone for joining us again. If you are interested in the CIPD OD&D group, it's for CIPD members. So if you are a member, but feel free to reach out to the CIPD. You can reach out to me because we have brilliant guests like Jules every quarter to come and join us as well. But Jules, you've just been outstanding. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much.